Welcome to the Entrepreneur Gene. I'm your host, Laurie Barkman. Each week, we'll hear from founders and CEOs to explore key decisions they've made for growth, value creation, and challenges along the way. This show is sponsored by the Business Transition Sherpa, offering entrepreneur advisory services from transition to transaction. Don't forget to hit subscribe, follow us for the latest episodes, and visit thebusinesstransitionsherpa.com for more exclusive content. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Entrepreneur Gene. I am so excited for my guest today. He is the person that gets us to say yes. There are so many things about my guest that I could share with you. I'll include just a few of them here. He's a seasoned advisor with over 17 years of experience and knowledge working with companies on the knowledge and science behind getting to the word yes. He's the author of the One-Page Sales Coach, and he's the president of YESCALATE. So please welcome to the stage the creator of these tools of engagement, Dean Minuto.
I am so excited to be here. And our brother, Henry DeVries, who introduced us, is going to be excited about this as well. I'm so proud of you. So thank you for asking me to contribute.
Thanks, Dino. All right. So let's begin with the very first question, which is the entrepreneur gene. Is there one? And what does it mean to you?
Yeah, they're born with that. And two things can both be true. They develop these skills over time. So, the thing is, are you built, do you build it, or are you born with it? So, and I think there's 3 or 4 directions that we go with the answer. But the funny line that I was thinking about today was, you can be born with great genes, and you can work out to look better in your genes.
That is very true.
Right?
That is very true. And working the muscle of being an entrepreneur is really your point, right?
Yeah, that's really what my focus is. So one of the really great things about what you and I do is we get to meet really smart people. And, most people, if they're lucky, will meet an author, will read a book that will change their life. That happens for me. It's just a blessing. That happens for me about every quarter. And, you're one of those people. I think you're onto something that's going to be transformative for millions of businesses and millions of entrepreneurs. And we had someone else at that meeting who is going to make a huge difference. Our friend, my other brother, Stephen Robertson, wrote a book about Gen Z. And one of the points he made is that while they seem very different, and they are, they just haven't had a chance to develop certain muscles yet. Okay. So we think about the muscles that entrepreneurs develop. They develop perseverance muscles, they develop bounce back muscles. And this image, which is where I was taking us with that conversation, is the way I've started every Vistage meeting, every presentation for almost 30 years. This image is called self-made man. And yes, you're born, your genes and the DNA that drives those genes make Arnold Schwarzenegger. But even Arnold Schwarzenegger, if he didn't eat right, if he didn't do the right exercises, was never going to be Mr. Universe. So there's 4 or 5 things we can talk about that entrepreneurs do with what they're born with. And I'm happy to go into that as well. But I think it's both. I think 2 things can both be true.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think the analogy of fitting into your genes is something that we can all work on as entrepreneurs.
Well, it really is. I think we're all built to get the outcomes we want. The brain, and that's what I really do, is teach a summary course in brain science to CEOs. And the brain really is set up to help us succeed. We're beautifully built to do it. Now, maybe not right out of the womb, beautifully built to do it, but we are the winners of generations of people that have been challenged. I think most of the folks who don't consider themselves entrepreneurs are because they got it spanked out of them when they were little. There's 2 disorders. They're actually disorders that most entrepreneurs have at least one of them. ADD is considered a disorder, characterized by chemical issues, characterized by impatience. I mean, entrepreneurs, you being one, are characterized by their incredible impatience and desire to get things done. The other disorder, and this one is really striking, it's called ODD, which is oppositional defiant disorder. So if you think of the poster boy for ADD being Richard Branson, the poster boy for ODD would have been Steve Jobs, just not going to accept the status quo, and going to ask why, why. So, those things that we consider disorders are brain based, they are gene based, but based on the experience of our life, we develop certain muscles in terms of how we use them. You could end up being Elon Musk, or you could end up being Al Capone. It's, very similar makeups.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You had touched on something I want to dive into, which is challenges. And I want to know for you, Dean, as an entrepreneur, what's a challenge that you're facing right now?
Well, I think one of the things that's important to recognize is what the Top Guns recognize, right? Which is after every flight, they ask two questions, right? What do we do well? And what are we going to do different? And entrepreneurs are the ones that are constantly asking that question. They see the word failing, it's really an acronym: find an important lesson, invite needed growth. And I said I had one of the biggest challenges of my life over the last 3 years. So there's been major loss, major grief that I've suffered in my life. And there's a process that you can follow to learn from that and set that down as an example. That's a very personal example, but in business, even if it's in sales, the question to ask is, what did we learn? What did we learn? The sale didn't happen. Yeah, that's no problem. I haven't got every sale that I've gone after, but the learnings from those help me get the next one. And I think that that's something that every entrepreneur sees, in that trial, there's treasure.
Yes, absolutely. Well, let's pull on that thread a little bit. If you were going to give some advice to entrepreneurs and business owners, how to be better learners, how to have a test and learn mindset, what are some of the things that they can do?
you know the question there is so cool because it's everything that I work on, and I believe it's about creating a space. Often people are uncomfortable with ambiguity, and they think they got to know the answers before they go into something. And you don't. You got to ask the right questions. Much of entrepreneurship is asking the right questions, being curious. And the three questions that define everything I've done are: what works in this thing we're trying to do? Are there already models that work? If I was going to be a music producer, I would go to school on the last 100 years of pop music. And there's books that have been written, and I've read them because my interests are broad. But what did the hit makers do? And if you're really smart and you got a new band, find one of the number one hits from 10 years, from 20 years ago, do a cover of it. That's awesome. Give them all the money, but get your band some attention. So that's called a loss leader, right? But this applies to everything. I could look at a home shopping network and say, okay, is there a corporate librarian who is identifying the wins and doing the debriefs to figure out why they were wins? In every organization, most of my work, as you know, is with sales organizations. So I do help them get to yes faster. What I do is help them in sales engagement, learning, and in leveraging that learning. So in most organizations, you break up your sales group into thirds: your top third, your middle third, and your bottom third. And in your knowledge of business, and you're more educated than me, what percentage of companies' revenues do you think is generated by the top third?
Most of it, probably 80%.
Yeah, it's somewhere between 70 and 80%.
Yeah.
What percentage of the company's revenues is generated by the middle third?
Probably 5 to 10.
Exactly. They do about what they should in the middle third. They do about a quarter to 30%. 0 to 5, 0 to 10 is that bottom percent. Now, think about a third column in this questionnaire. What percentage of a company's time and training efforts are focused, and coaching are focused on each of those thirds?
It's probably flipped, right?
It's flipped. This has always blown my mind because the first question I ask is this: what do your top performers do? If you're an entrepreneur, what do you do on your best day? That's the first thing I ask. I go to school on the top performers because if they can do it, we can. It's what Schwarzenegger did to become Schwarzenegger. He didn't have calf muscles. There was an American bodybuilder who was beating him at all the competitions. Schwarzenegger came to America to build his calf muscles. Find the people who are doing it, right? Then the second question I ask is, why do those things work? So if we can identify practices, best practices, the second question is, why do they work? And there's libraries explaining everything now, and with our ability to access information, we have all of behavioral psychology studies at our fingertips. We have brain science at our fingertips. So what works? Why does it work? And then the third question is, how do I calibrate it? How do I calibrate it in this situation in a way that's consistent with how I want to present myself to the world? Right. So, but once you identify those, now it's built, baby. It's not born. Ritz-Carlton wasn't born. Horst Schulze built it. IBM wasn't born. Tom Watson and his son built it. So there's a path you can follow to build a culture, to build. So, I went off your track a little bit there.
No, it's good. I think that, one of the things just to kind of double click on is asking really good questions. And you laid out a few really important but simple, if I can use those words, questions to get leaders to think differently about their organization. And you have a specialty in sales, so we spent some time on that. That makes a ton of sense. So in terms of challenges that entrepreneurs may be facing, so many of us are facing staffing challenges, and how do we get the right fit clients? And just to, again, reiterate, sometimes asking the right questions is just half the battle. Why are we doing this, or why aren't we doing that?
So I think the first question that I would have someone ask is, what are the results you want to achieve? Okay. So if you can be clear on that, then there's 5 steps that I'd outline, right? And the first step, and let's say you want to get better at sales. Well, selling is a muscle. Presenting is a muscle. Cold calling is a muscle. So how do we build muscle? How's this guy build muscle? Well, the first thing he's got to do, he's got to consume the right stuff. Okay. So you got to make sure you're teaching your team the right content. Okay. And that they're not out there consuming bad stuff, because there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of people who have been 30 years in sales, and they're as bad now as they were their first day in sales. And they're the people telling your new folks what to do. It blows my mind. But there's things that work. So you got to consume the right content, okay? And find people who have that for you. The second thing you got to do is you got to actually do some exercise. You got to actually do some curls. There's things you need to do daily and weekly with your team, because we forget. We get out of, here's an example. We know what all top performers have always done is make their message visual. They bring props, they bring videos, but the brain science is information gets to customers' brains 30 times faster through the eyes than through the ears. So never say it if you can show it. And when I say that, people immediately go, oh, here's what we used to, we got away with it. Over time, I equate high performance to a metaphor of a Ferrari. A Ferrari needs wheel alignments. A Ferrari needs oil changes. You don't throw it away. You're going to hit bumps in the road as an entrepreneur. Your wheels are going to get out of alignment. You got to make sure you go back, find the people who can help you get back in alignment. So what you eat, what you consume. The second thing is what you do on a daily basis. Horst Schulze at Ritz-Carlton, there were behaviors that they followed every day. By the way, the people who have stayed at Ritz-Carlton have then applied some of those even to Chick-fil-A. The owner of Chick-fil-A loved when he thanked someone at Ritz-Carlton and they said, "It's our pleasure." And he said, "We're going to start doing that." The head of learning and development said it took years to get the team to do that one behavior. So it takes time. And the third thing I would say for folks is to revisit that great Simon Sinek video on why, because you will do whatever you need to do if you have the right reason, right? So the fourth, I'm just going to say this, unless you got to have a community. I look for people like you, Laurie, who I know are exceptional and I know are going to be exceptional and do exceptional things, because you're going to make me exceptional. I've been a member of Vistage now close to 20 years because I'm surrounded by people who just want to help me get better, right? So find your peers, find those organizations, and they're out there.
Yeah, absolutely they are. Dean, we've spent a great part of this interview learning from you, which is awesome. And thank you for that. Now I want to switch gears a little bit and I want to learn more about you. So the question is, what's your origin story? Take us back to little Dino.
Wow, my origin story. So, little Dino uh, was, my dad would tell you, was not normal. My parents just celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary, and my partner, Carrie, and I took them up to the Sagamore. And he shared with her that, my dad was an executive at IBM, no college education. When dad retired, he had 1,000 employees, my hero. And at 6 or 7 years old, I asked him, how does commerce work? I mean, not normal. We got the World Book Encyclopedia as a major investment in the 70s. And to punish me, my parents would take it away and send me out to play. So it's like I love to learn. And then I figured out that people would pay me to do things they didn't want to do, to wash and wax cars, to mow lawns. And then I was off and running. And once I realized that one of the things that people don't want to do is read, my future was secure. I read at least a book a week. And when I read things that are useful and fun, Laurie, it rings like a bell, bong, and I never forget it. And people find that very useful. So I started my career doing something really fun. I started as a consultant. I was the youngest consultant the Dun& Bradstreet Corporation ever had for a division called Dunn's Marketing. And I asked myself, who's doing what I want to do? Who are the top performers? What are they doing? And there were two. And those two top performers, Joe Volpe out on the West Coast and Stephen Rand out on the East Coast, became my closest friends. They didn't want to at first, Laurie, but I pursued them. I pursued them. And what do you learn from people who are doing things that you want to do? Everything. So listen, one of the key things is to find the mentors that are doing what you want to do. So I found them. Then I figured out that exposing myself to a corporate environment wasn't right for Dino. And one day I came to work, and one of my older peers, he was in his 50s, was in his office weeping. And I went in and I asked Ed what was going on. And he showed me a crumpled piece of paper. And it was from our VP declaring him surplus. Can you imagine they actually use the word surplus to describe human
Ouch.
beings? And by the way, we're talking almost 100% profit margins. D&B sells data, and they're calling someone surplus. And he looked at me and said, what am I going to do now? This is all I've known. Laurie, I was 22 years old. And I said, no one's ever going to do that for me. So I took what I had learned from sales and from direct mail, from telemarketing, from field sales, and I went out and started sharing what I had learned. And pretty quickly, people were paying me $1,000 a day. And when you're 23 and it's, 1990, that was all the money in the world. And so, I trained over 100,000 sales reps. The book that I wrote is called The One-Page Sales Coach. Major clients, GE, the Hartford, Sears, and that transformed into the work I do, summarizing this stuff and creating a system that companies can apply.
I love it. I love it. And a related question, if you could go back in time and give yourself some entrepreneurial advice now that you have all these years of wisdom behind you, what would that advice be?
So, great question. I go back in time way too much, Laurie. I'd prefer to go back in time and look at what are the great lessons that I learned. So here's one. I was selling light bulbs in the Cub Scouts. I've never told this story. Henry doesn't know the story. Nobody told the story. My dad had a buddy that had a business. Okay. Condor Electronics was Mike's business. So I went in and I asked him if he wanted to buy any light bulbs. He said, I don't want to buy light bulbs, kid. After me harassing him, okay, this ODD, whatever this, there's no quit button. Okay. He eventually said, kid, how many light bulbs do you have? And he bought all the light bulbs I had. Great learning. You need one great client. You need one great client. And in my life, I've had some of those one great clients. Okay. You need what I call quadrant one clients, and you need to be quadrant one to them. And I can describe what that means, but not all customers are created equal. And everyone who's listening to this knows what I'm talking about. You got quadrant one clients that are high gain and easy to work with. And you got quadrant four clients that are risky and painful to work with. I have a quadrant one client. He's been my client for 27 years. and his name is Mark Lang, and he's currently an executive for Arch Insurance, which just was invited onto the S&P 500. But my message is find these people that you can go through life together with. You know, Mark has been like my Medici, helping me practice and learn my art. And this is someone who's family to me right at this point. So I think that's another thing that I would say has been important is to whatever you do, do it with love and find the people who are going to give that love back to you.
That's a beautiful message. And in a dog eat dog world, especially sales, it can be transactional. It doesn't have the relationship and it doesn't have that long lasting aspect to it. I love how you've brought that together in your practice and how you're, you're teaching that in the framework.
The first level that people think about in sales is transactions. But what you really need to think about is transformational. What you really need to think about is how we, in this amazing branding that my clients at Arch came up with, how do we pursue better together? That's what we're here to do. I'm here to help you do better, you know? If, and I think that's we should go in every situation and ask, how can we help this person be better?
Yes, that's an excellent question. And you talked about so many things. I know you're not just all work and no play. So tell me, what do you do outside of consulting and when you're not working, quote unquote?
So I 30 years ago, when I was, so I'm 56, and I've been doing what I do since I was 22. So more than 2000, CEO level workshops in that time. And I have been taking my retirement the whole way. So I spend half a day doing what I do in business. And I spend another half of the day on me. So there's, I love to cook. I love music. I've been searching my whole life for a best friend. She just came into my life a few months ago. She has transformed me. And her name is Carrie. And it's like, she's the most incredible person in the world. And she focuses on body science. So she's a fitness professional, a professional athlete. She's the fitness host on QVC. And I've lost 20 pounds in the last 2 months. So I'm an example of what folks can do. By the way, and I love to cook and I love to eat. And you have seen me in action, how much I love bourbon. And you don't have to eliminate any of that. You just have to be smart. I'll use a word that triggers people. We are ignorant about so many things in life. I'm a great cook, but I was totally ignorant about how much olive oil I was using. I was totally ignorant about how much salt I was using. And when you meet someone who gives you an understanding and talks to you about, hey, Dino, did you go the whole day without drinking water? And I said, I've gone like 30 years without drinking water. Like I go from coffee to bourbon. Which part is confusing? Right. But when you understand what having 7 glasses of water can do, I mean, it's unbelievable. So it's music, it's love, it's learning. That's what I do outside of this.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on the Entrepreneur Gene with me. And if people want to get in touch with you, Dean, what's a good way to do that?
That it's Dean at YESCALATE.com. As far as I know, I'm the only Dean Minuto out there. And this is all I do and all I want to do. I would like to make a difference in the world. So the ancient Stoics had a phrase, utile et dulce. In every situation, ask yourself, is it useful and is it sweet? And that's what I hope to be, is useful. And I hope to help develop tools that are useful for others, which is what the great Bobby Carlyle illustrated with this photo or this painting of this photo of her statue. It's a person carving themselves out of a block of granite. And I'll just put a plug in, something that I shared with all the authors where we met. I gave you each a copy of one of the most influential books I've ever come across, which is Be the Sun and Not the Salt by Dr. Harry Cohen. That is a life-changing book.
Well, thank you for that recommendation. And absolutely, if people want to get in touch, we'll also have the links in the show notes and people can find you. So thank you, Dean. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you to my audience. And I hope that this show is a very exciting starting point for you, something that you laughed about. Make sure you tell a friend and tell them to listen. So again, thank you, Dean, for coming on.
Thank you for asking me.
All right. This has been another great episode of The Entrepreneur Gene. See you next time. Hey, that's a wrap. This show is sponsored by the Business Transition Sherpa, working with entrepreneurs who want to escape feeling like a prisoner in their own business and to eventually let go flawlessly. If you loved today's episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And if you want to help support The Entrepreneur Gene, I'd encourage you to leave a rating and review. Ratings and reviews truly help our show grow and get in front of more entrepreneurs just like you. If you do leave a rating and review, we'll be so happy. Take a screenshot of it, send it to my email, Laurie@btsherpa.com, and we'll send you a free digital copy of my book, The Business Transition Handbook. And we'll also enter you to win one of our monthly swag boxes. For show notes, including links to everything in today's episode, be sure to visit btsherpa.com. Also, as a reminder, you can watch this full video interview on our YouTube channel for the Business Transition Sherpa. While you're there, be sure to check out videos from our award-winning podcast called Succession Stories. We'll see you next time on The Entrepreneur Gene.